and I will send it over to you, Matt. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Lars. How's everybody doing today? Thank you for joining. So like Lars said, we're doing a few-part series, and this first one we're going to do is going to be just kind of getting into the basics of where things are, how we can find certain items, and it's just all about being able to move around easily. And we'll also get into a little bit of modification in the post, just so you can see how some of that is done. So first, what I want to do is I just want to kind of go over the agenda of what we're going to do. So at the beginning of this, I want to go over Notepad++, which is what we suggest and typically use for our post modifications. Just going over some of the settings of how we can best make that the workflow of that easier for you to use. Next, we're just going to look through how to search the post processor, the structure, some typical changes that take place, and then we're going to actually look at how we want to see requests come in from customers, so that it makes it easier for us to be able to do the changes and know exactly what they're wanting. And then we'll actually look at doing some of those modifications. Okay. So first, let's start with how we set up Notepad++. So typically what we do, all of our post processors are done through JavaScript programming language. So as you can kind of see on the image, and we'll go through this here in a second, we'll select JavaScript and we'll actually add this extension, the CPS, which is the extension of our post processor. And then another thing that I've done is this theme change. It creates, this is one that I don't know if too many people use it, but I know there are some inside of our group that use the Bespin as their theme. And it just creates a black background, and it does all the coloring of the text, and it just makes it easier being able to see things, and I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. And then also what we have is the function list, and I'll kind of cover what this is and how it pertains to it, our code here in a minute, and then setting the language of JavaScript for the actual code. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this real quick. So in Notepad, whenever you open up a file, it may typically look something like this. Kind of have white text. You may actually have black text and a white background by default. So to begin, we'll go into our settings, style configurator, which then brings up this window. Okay, so here's where we're going to change the theme. By default, I think there's like at the very top, there's this default stylers. So right underneath that, I always pick that Bespin. And you'll see here in a second how that kind of helps visibility on the actual file. Okay, so then next we're going to go to this language column, and I'm going to find JavaScript. My style is default, and you'll see the default extension is JS, and then I'm going to add this user extension of CPS. Then once I have that done, I'm going to hit save and close. Okay, so now with this text as it is, it's not actually, the Notepad++ isn't actually seeing it as JavaScript language. Okay, so to be able to change that, I'm going to go to language, find J, and then hit JavaScript. So now once I do this, this will make the program say, okay, all this language coding is through JavaScript. And so now it codes it for that. So you can see all the text color changes for JavaScript programming. Now, I've already got function list up here. I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Okay, so to get that function list up, I'm going to go to View, and then pick Function List. Now, typically it's going to default on the right-hand side. It's just like in the other like browser or whatever. I can move it around wherever I want. I like to put mine on the left side. just because it makes it easier for some of the whenever I'm actually doing the modifications, because it's right beside each other. That dock in there. There we go. So whenever you do that, do the function list, it'll show up empty at first. Hit this little reload button, and it'll show all these little functions underneath. Okay, and we'll cover kind of what this is here in a little bit too. Okay. So whenever you're going through trying to find things inside of the post, always remember Ctrl F is your friend. You can select text and hit Ctrl F, and it'll automatically insert the text in the find what line. So then you can toggle through it and find all the different areas that text is in. Or if you don't know where this is or even see it initially, just hit Ctrl F and type in what you want, and it'll do the same thing. Another thing, if you're actually trying to go through and find functions like onOpen or onSection, and we'll cover this again here in a minute, this function list acts as kind of a speed travel too. You can just double click on the function, and it would take you to where that section is, that section of coding is. Okay, and again, we'll kind of go through some of that whenever we get more into the editing side of the presentation. So just getting familiar with how the post is kind of structured. So we have the function list on the side, and all those functions basically have the information of what and how the code will post out through the program. So the functions that are typically changed whenever we're actually asked to do modifications are your onOpen section, where you have like your program name, the tool list, your G90, G91 calls, and your unit, whether it's intrametric. The on section, where your tool paths begin for tool changes, coolant calls, if you have a comment for your operation, your initial positioning moves, work offsets, and then there's some other odd ones in there. I call them all odd just for where they're placed, but if you have the optional stop turned on, so where you place the M1 or your coolant off at the end of a tool path, those are actually in the on section as well, and we'll look at that too. Okay, so some other ones: on cycle, cycle point, cycle end. Those are all dealing with your drilling operations. So underneath that, you'll have your get common cycle, which returns your X, Y, Z and the R value in your drilling cycles or in your tapping and boring and all that stuff. The on section end, I say there's not much going on because there's not really much programmed in there, and I'll kind of show you that too. This is where I would typically put my coolant off and optional stop commands as well, just because sometimes it makes it easier to see. And then the on close, which is just everything at the end of the program. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of this, and I'll show you also the relation to the program and our posted code. So here again on the function list, you have all these different functions. If you go into here, go over to this one. I have onOpen, so I'll just double click on that and go to my onOpen function. Okay, so here I can see this is where it's creating the variables for my A and B axis. If I keep scrolling down, if you see the user parameter for write tools, that's where this is defined as well. So that's just some of the basic information in there. Now, the one thing I want to show is you might wonder, how does this onOpen, on section have in relation to what's coming out of my program? Okay, So what I want to show you real quick is I've got this basic Cammania part that probably everybody knows. Okay, so I go in my setup, I'm going to hit post process. One thing that probably not a lot of people have ever used or seen, or maybe even laugh at, because I know I have, is this dump.cps. Okay, if I go to this and actually post out, that was loud. Yes. So with this dump.cps, it actually posts out all the parameters and information that actually pertain to that program that you created inside an Inventor. And then what you see at the very top is on open. Okay. So now if I do that and I go to on section, you can see that now I have the on section. So those functions actually relate to how the information is posted out through the program. And then in these sections I have certain parameters that I can use and call for the information. Okay, so if I come down here, I've got all my tool information, and then I've got these initial position calls. Okay, and then once I go through that, it goes into my actual movements and cutting into the part. And then I can do the same for on cycle. And then I get my cycle types and everything. And then you can see cycle point and cycle end. And then on section end. So the way you can kind of look at it is, if you see on section, the section is dealing with the actual toolpath. The whole section is the toolpath. So it's your tool call, coolant, your work offset, initial positions, all your rapid moves, linear, whatever it takes for that to complete that toolpath. And then you'll see on section end. And then so each toolpath is considered a new section. Okay. All right. So then let's go back to here. So some typical items that we see changed a lot: coolant, and this could be just location. Maybe it's different M codes for the coolant, whatever it may pertain to. The work offsets, again, location, what line they're located on or where at they're just located in general, whether they want them on every tool change, what have you. The initial position calls, optional stops, and then just could be any G codes. So like, maybe they want some kind of random line of G codes, before, right after your right tool section. And so, this could just be something you end up hard coding in, which I'll explain more here in a minute. Okay. All right. Okay, so that was just kind of a general overview of, the different functions that you'll typically be looking at, some of the typical changes that can be made, and how you can find them. Next, what I want to kind of look at is the actual programming side of it. That way, you just kind of get a basic idea of what it is, and as we go through the series, we'll kind of get more built up in the JavaScript programming. One thing I do want to show, even though I'm showing you some of this stuff, there is a website that you guys can go to. It's an awesome website. It's w3schools.com. Okay. Since we use JavaScript language, you can learn so much from this of just how to actually program JavaScript and use it inside of our post processor. So, if you get a chance, always come to this website and you can go through these tutorials. And if you really get into it, you can actually get a certification through here. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into this. So anywhere through the program that you're actually trying to return some kind of information into the posted file, you'll typically see a write block, a write comment, or a write line. And so these are actually functions inside your post processor, and those functions define how the information is going to be returned into your end product file. Okay, so write block, it's literally what it's mean. You know, it'll write block the information. So if you say, I want a G40, you know, or whatever, you know, that's just a random number. You know, there's a way that you can either type out G40 by itself, or I can do like a G format call and actually format it to a certain information. And we'll look at that more here too in a few minutes. Write comment. If you do this kind of function call, it's actually going to write a comment line of whatever text is in it. And then a write line is, you know, like I say, it's typically used for string text, or the one place that you'll see it the most in the post processor is just creating the blank line in between each toolpath. So it's kind of one of those that you remove almost all the time anyways. And then one thing you always got to keep in mind, whenever you do these command calls or these function calls, you always have to end that line with a semicolon. You know, I'll show you why more, because it's whenever you don't, your post processor will always error out, and you'll have to then figure out, what am I missing that's making it not work? All right, and then whenever we're actually looking at the code, you know, say there's something that you want to take out, or that the customer is wanting to take out. There's a couple different ways you can look at it. I'm probably one of the ones that's more conservative on removing information. I hate deleting information that you never know, they may come back and say, oh, hey, by the way, I actually wanted that in. So I typically don't actually delete a lot of stuff out of the post processors, which maybe, who knows if that's right or wrong. But so, you know, removing information, you can always delete it. Or the one thing that I do the most is I actually comment out the lines. So if it's a single line, you know, I do the double slash. If it's a block comment, then I do, you know, the slash asterisk thing here. So, yeah, that's kind of your preference on how you want to do it. I do more commenting rather than actually deleting information, because you never know when they might come back and say, oh, hey, I actually need that information in there still, and you don't want to just go back and recreate it every time. Okay. All right. So before I get into that, I'm going to look at some of this stuff real quick. Go back into my Notepad. Okay, so again, I talked about write blocks, write comment, write lines. So double click on here. So again, here's my write block function. So whenever I actually start a line with write block, it's referring to this function and formats it for this. So there's a couple different things going on in here, which we can look at too. This show sequence numbers is actually a user property. Let's see how do I want to do that. Yeah. So depending on how you have your user properties done, it depends on how it's actually going to post the code out. So if you have show sequence numbers turned off, then it's going to skip all this, and then it's just going to do a regular line with the arguments. Okay. If you have it turned on, it's going to do your in number with the sequence number, and then it's going to post your arguments inside of that line. And so what I'm talking about there is, if I come up here, there's this show sequence numbers property that you can actually change at the post process dialog. If this is true, then it's going to do the in number. If it's false, it's not going to post the in number. Okay. All right. Let's let's just go ahead and start looking at the request. So typically what we want to see whenever we have a customer submit for post modification is we'd like to have a Word document or some kind of text document having an itemized list with the changes that they're wanting, and then in turn post a code below it that shows or demonstrates basically the exact spot that they're wanting that code in so that we can verify for sure that that's what they're wanting. Okay, so for that, I'm going to show you this. So this would be an example of kind of how we'd want it. Here's my request, 6 items that they're wanting changed, and then here's the actual code below showing the modifications. Okay, so you can see I've got number 1 here on my G0 Z0.2, number 3 on here on the G80, so that's at the end of the cycle, and so forth. So it's just typical changes like that, and that's how we want to see it sent in by the customer, just for clarity and ease of actual modification. So then once we have that, then we can actually go in and look at this. So what I would typically do is I'm going to dock this on the left just to make things easier. I always like to kind of split up my screen. So I'm going to drag this off, create a new window for that post processor, and then just do this. So now once I have this, I can actually see the file that the customer sent in, and I can actually see my post. So then I'm not having to switch back and forth between screens all the time. I can just look at the modifications needed and change them in my file. So let's just start with the first thing. Coolant. It made online after the G43 line. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit further and see this is where they're talking about. Now, for coolant, in the post processor, there's a couple different ways you can do it. Depends on the machines that you're working on. If you have a machine that only has one type of coolant, maybe it's just flood all the time, then you can put in a right block line of an M8, okay? Or the one that they have set up the most is a set coolant, okay? So set coolant, you can actually specify the different types of coolant, the ways that the coolant flows through, or whether you're just doing air or whatnot, and you can put that M number with it, okay? And so then whenever you call this set coolant function inside of a line, it will look for the type of coolant that's posted out by your program, and then associate that number code with it. Okay, so now here's the perfect example. So I'm going to select set coolant because I want to find out where this is in my code. Okay, so I've double clicked on the function, got here. Now I want to double click on the actual text, and I'm going to hit Ctrl F, and I'm going to say find next, and it's not going to go very far. Actually, let's do up. I'm going to do this direction up so I can get to it quicker. Alright, so here is my set coolant, and I'm calling the tool coolant. Okay. Now, you might be wondering where this is. I know it's on the on section just because I've seen it so many times. But if you scroll up a little bit farther, actually a lot bit farther, you can find, there it is, on section. Okay, and now here's another reason why I like the best bin theme. Okay, so you can see over here on the left hand side, see this little red line? That shows you the containment of the on section function. So as I follow this down, you can see the red line keeps going. Here's my set coolant, so I know it's in the on section. Okay. Now, what I know else also with this is where it's posting out. So I've got G17 call here. Here's my G43 call line with the Z in and my H offset. Okay, and then okay, so that's where it's calling right now. So if I was to go over here to my inventor, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick post, get rid of that dumper, and I'm just going to use generic costs. It's going to be loud. Okay, so I posted this code out. I can see my M8 right here is right after my work offset and before these initial position calls. Okay, so I'm wanting it to be in this G0 line right after my G43. And it could actually be just another line right here and do M8. You know, that's something else there. Again, you have to ask, make sure that if they're wanting it in the line or right above it. Okay. But anyways, so there again, if I go back to my post, since I don't want to actually remove that because, you know, they may come back later on and say, hey, I don't want to put that in the, you know, after the G43 line. I want it back to where it was before or right after work offset. I'm just going to go ahead and do the double slash to comment that line out. Okay, and then I want to find G43, which is right down here. Then I'm going to do a right block right after this. Okay, so with this, it's going to lead me into something else to explain. So what you can see in these right blocks is, you know, G format, Z output. So how do you know what to use here? Okay, so at the beginning, right after user properties, you'll see all these variable calls defining certain formats or outputs, motion modal planes, plane modal, all this. So in this, we'll go ahead and look at M format because that's what we're going to work with. Okay, so I've got M format, so that's specifying I'm going to do an M code basically. I'm creating a format with the prefix of M, then I'm defining the decimals. Okay, so obviously since I'm doing M code, I'm not going to have a decimal. You know, there's also if you want to do like a width, you know, I think it defaults to a width of 1, so it'll only do like, you know, if I put M or a 9, it'll do M9 or M8. If you want to specify doing more, I can do width of 2. Okay, and so that'll create it. It'll create a code, an M code, 2 characters wide. Basically, is what that's calling. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take that out. That's just for reference. Okay, so here's your M formats. Now with the outputs, these are similar to how you do above. So here we're doing create formats. On this one, we're actually doing variables. So we're just taking the actual integer variables that are posted out from Inventor, HSM, or HSM Works Fusion, whichever one, and formatting them to these up here. So creating a variable, it's going to have a prefix of X, and then what I'm doing is I want to use XYZ format, which is right here, to then format how the decimals or the integer is going to show posted out. So like here, you have 6.8, or I guess this one's better, Y 0.275. Okay, so with that, if I look at my XYZ, decimals unit equals, so if it's millimeter in units, I'm going to use 3 decimal. If it's inches, I'm going to go to 4 decimals, basically is what that's saying. Okay, so that's kind of how the formats or the variables and the formats work. You can add more to these if you want for different, however you want to do it. They can be done. You can add more to use them in other functions. So these are global. You can use these throughout the whole post. There are some that you can create within a function that would just be local to that. So if you're wanting to change something at the function level that's similar to what one of these other formats or outputs are, you can do that, and it'll just pertain to that function itself. So I've seen that done too. It's just kind of how you want to do it. All right. So now back to. All right. Here we go. So back to this. So now let's say we want to put this right block in here, and I'm just going to do an imp format dot format. I'm just going to call for M8. Okay. So now I've got my integer in here, closing parentheses, and then here's the other thing I want to show you. So as I select these parentheses, making sure that statements are fully enclosed the way they're supposed to be, whether it's parentheses, curly brackets, whatever. You can kind of see, so it's kind of not highlighted as much on that parenthesis, and if you go to the other one and it's right after the right block, it looks the same. So that's showing you which parentheses you're closing. So on this one, I've got a fully enclosed statement. I can then hit a semicolon to end that line, so it knows that's the end of that statement line, and then I can go back and post code out. Okay, so I can do this, save that, come back into HSM. It's loud. And then I now get an M8 after my G43 line. Okay, so that's a simple, quick change on that. This T2 is another user property for preloading tools. Yeah, that's toggle on off as well. But anyways, so that gets our coolant set to just to be right after that G43 line. All right, let's pull those back up. Okay. The other thing good about this, once I get something done, I always like to come in and do a change on it to where it just I strike through it, or maybe I underline it, say I got that one done. I can move on to the next line. So here's a good one. At the beginning of each tool change or each tool, I want to have WCS output on the first positioning line. Okay, so let's see if we can find that in our example here. Okay, so again here, G0XY, I want to put the W or the work offset right here in this line. Okay, so that would assume, there again, clarifications, but typically the way our posts work, it'll only post your work offset in the initial section or initial toolpath, and then from there it's kind of assumed that it's on the same one in the machine. And I'm going to show a couple different ways of how you can kind of work around that. So here again, I'm going to do Ctrl F. I'm going to search for work offset. Again, I know that the work offset that I'm looking for is in the on section, and I know what it looks like in my head. And so here we go. So you just kind of search for it until you see something. I know that's kind of maybe not really archaic, but not as easy. But you know, once you get to a point, you can see here that I know I'm defining my actual work offset. So I've even got a warning. The work offset has not been specified. Using G54 as WCS. So if you ever in your setup, I'll show you how that'll work. In your setup on your post-process tab, if you leave this at 0, that'll give you a warning saying that you haven't actually established G54. So I would have to put 1 here to fully establish that as my G54 location. Oops. Okay, but anyways, so back to this one. All right, so basically what it's doing is, let's look at that dumper again. That's kind of funny, but okay, so work offset equals 0. So I had my actual work offset set to 0 before, so that's what posted here. So now that I changed that to 1, this would now read 1. And so what it would do is, in our actual code, it's going to call variable work offset equals current section dot work offset. So again, if I look at this, current section dot work offset. Okay, so that's what it's pulling. So it's going to pull a value of 1. Okay, so if work offset equals 0, then it gives me the warning. If it is greater than 0, so I start my if statement for that, and then I create another one. If it's greater than 26, I've got too many work offsets, so I'm out of range. If it's greater than 6, then it goes down to posting out, 110 minus 7 plus the work offset number. So that's kind of going back in hand with this 154P code. And then the one that I'm going to look at the most right here is my G format 53 plus the work offset. So I'm doing my machine home or my machine work offset plus 1, creating 54. Now, the one thing you'll notice here, this if statement work offset, this little exclamation mark equals means work offset does not equal current work offset. Okay, so the only time it's actually going to post something is at the beginning, because my work offset does not equal the current work offset, because the way that it's set up is current work offset equals undefined, so it's basically 0. So I'm actually defining it in the initial section or the initial toolpath. So that's what this is doing. Since the work offset doesn't equal the current work offset, it's going to post this out. Then anytime it goes through another section, it's going to look at it. It's going to say, oh, my work offset does equal the current work offset. So then it's not going to actually post anything out. So the one thing that you can do if you want it to post out every time is I typically will, and this is one of the times, I would actually remove this if statement, or actually you can comment it out as well, and then comment out this line. So now that if statement is technically commented out, but I've still got this information that's still going to post out. So now this would actually post that G54 in this location at every tool, which it is already. Anyways. Okay, so that's what that would be. Now if you want it to go into a certain place, and not here, I can then again comment that line out. And what I would do is, if I go back into this request that was sent, they're wanting it at the G0XY and the G43, so they're actually wanting it in this line. All right. So again, come back to my post. I know that it's right around the G43 line, so my first thought is I'm going to search for G43. I'm going to find it. I know that it's below my work offset, because here's my work offset, and then here's my G43. So what they're wanting is they're wanting in this G90, G0. So let me do this because I know this is confusing sometimes. This is all one right block statement: G90, G0, XY. Okay. So in here, I'm going to add it right after the G0. And we're going to do something similar to what, basically the little addition equation inside of that initial right block for the G54. So I'm just going to do G format, format 53 plus work offset, because it saves that value inside of that work offset variable, since I'm still in the same section, so I can call it up. Okay, so do that. Go ahead and save. And I'm going to go in here, go post. So here's a prime example of figuring out that you messed something up. User properties are not there. So just a little hint. So what I did is I forgot to actually put a comma. There again, syntax. All right, save that. I can come up here, hit refresh, and now my user property is back. All right, good to go. Okay, so now you can see this G0 line now has G54 in it. And it will at every tool. Cool. So that's just that's changing where your work offset's kind of located, and just the basic information for that one. Okay. Another one I want to show you real quick. So this M9 for your cooling off. Okay. So this is another one that's I always find it kind of interesting. So that one, they're saying at the end of each tool, before it retracts, they're wanting to do, the cooling off command. So I know whenever I first started doing this, I'm like, well, that's at the end of the section, so I'm going to go on section end. Yet whenever you look at this, there's nothing about cooling in here. So then this is why I always say that I always find it odd. If I go to the on section, go up to the top here of the on section, you'll find, okay, so here's my command stop spindle, okay, and then there is, okay, so I know that's the stop spindle. So I know it's an on command. I'm going to do coolant. Okay, so right underneath the operation comment is here is command coolant off. All right. So if I go back to my editor, you'll see. Maybe. No, typically there'd be like a right after this, or so it's reversed. After this, there would be like an M9 showing. Right. anyways, so that's typically where your M9 would show up. So right here, command colon off. I would always take that out right there. And then what it's wanting to do is do this G0, Z0.6. So that's right before the retract. And again, you'll get more familiar with all this as you go on. That's just kind of some of the stuff that you have to pick up as you go, kind of where things are located and all that. So let's go back to where that was. So that's where it's going to actually post. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Oh, that's why I took that out there. There we go. All right, let's do this. I'll show this again so you can. Cause I think that's what I was doing. I was making it kind of screwballed. That's really loud. Yeah, apparently not. No figures. Anyways. So yeah, typically what it would do, and it would actually do it actually after this optional stop, it would put it there, and then what somebody's wanting is to actually put it up here, because you have your single stop, colon off, and then your G53, G0, Z0 for the actual retract. So what I would do is I would actually search for this G53 inside the post. Okay, so here's my G53 line. And I know this is at the end because so I'm calling retracted equals true. Okay, so here I'm going to just do another right block. I know it's going to be N9 for coolant off, so I could do another on command call or a set coolant, but I'm just going to do in format M9. Do that there. Save that. Okay, so then there's my M9 right there. Okay, so that's kind of some of the basics of how you find things and just how you would go about actually making changes in the program itself. I'm going to go ahead and stop there to see if there's any questions or anything. And just remember, as we go on, we'll get more in depth in how we actually do the programming and all that.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I think that this was really good. Kind of like giving a step behind the curtain here, and definitely want to open up this for questions. So one thing I made a note about, you showed a website, w3schools.com, I believe it was.
Yep.
I never knew that existed, and that's actually pretty cool that, if you are new to this and want to get into this is probably a good place to kind of like just get a little bit of a of an overview of JavaScript.
Yeah, no, I lived almost on this website whenever I started, learning how to do the post processors and stuff. Just because there literally is so much information.
We have a question here. Could you please explain some more about built-in properties? I don't know if this is something you're planning on covering later on in one of the other webinars, or if it's something you can just like touch on in a couple of minutes here.
Yeah, I can touch on it. I did kind of plan on doing some of it later because I've used user properties in lots of different forms, and actually using that code inside of actual how things are actually posted out. But anyway, so like user properties, some of the default ones. So let's go back in here real quick. Like these built-ins, these are always in there, no matter what. Okay, but the user-defined ones are customizable and can be called inside the program. So write machine, you had machine configuration or anything like that, you could do that. Write tools, it just looks through your whole program and finds all the tools. Um, but yeah, so these are just ones that you can use that helps further define how the code is actually interpreted and actually posted out. But user properties is one that I'm going to kind of go in and we're going to look at later on in one of the other webinars.
Good, that's good. Yeah, and actually, one of the things that I didn't know when I began was in regards to the building properties right on your post page there. When you go to post out, that you can actually go in and change the values right there. So in case somebody missed that, you can actually right when you go to post out, you select your post, and you can actually select and change some of those values right inside of the properties there. But it's pretty.
Yeah, and that's one thing that a lot, and if we have time later on, maybe on the last one, there's some really cool stuff that I like that a lot of people don't know about is available. What's called like interactive forms. So which actually gives you the ability to, let me see if I can pull one up real quick. Gives you all those user properties like directly in front of you without having to go through this dialogue. So like I could do, let's just do one of this one. So whenever I actually go here, like this is a customized setup sheet that I created. So I can actually get this form pulled up where I can actually fill out more information, and these are the user-defined properties that are in the actual dialog. But here I can actually create pull-down list of options to select from and define integers and more lists. So once I actually fill this out, it would actually go into my post processor and insert that information in the places that I told it to.
So something like that might be, I don't know if that's a template that we can share at the end of this series, or if it's something that you're thinking about coming back to. I mean, that's, to me, it looks a little advanced, but that's very cool, though.
Yeah, and it's one that everybody has access to. Well, it's typically only through the HSMWorks install. It's called the interactive post in HSMWorks. But yeah, so everybody, if you have HSMWorks, you have it. But yeah, if we have time on the last webinar, or if we don't, then maybe we can do another one that's more advanced to deal with that.
Sure. Another question here is about customizing your work coordinate system offsets for vertical machines. So I go a little bit deeper. If I want to use the same tool for 4 work pieces and later change it, I'm not quite sure I get that.
Okay. So I think so if you're doing something like that, let's look at the 4 work pieces later and change it later. So basically, what I'm thinking is we've got 4 parts that could all be the same, maybe not, maybe using the same tool, but they're different types of parts. So that would be like an assembly level, in my opinion, and have the different steps for that.
You know what, Igor, if you want to send me an email and kind of like explain a little bit deeper, and then I will take it up with Matt, and we can see if we can't push it into to maybe the next one or one of the other ones in this series. that's definitely not a problem. Any other questions for Matt here before we hit the top of the hour? And like I said, I think this was really great, Matt. It was a good way to kind of like, I'm always thinking of the people. Some people on this call have a lot of experience. Some people don't have much experience. And I definitely think this was a great way to kind of like get people in and kind of like see how you work through some of these things and your thought process behind it. So definitely
Awesome.
appreciate that. All right, I don't see any more questions coming in, so I am going to say that was a lot of information, a lot of fantastic information. So again, Matt, thank you so much, and to the rest of you, thank you so much for sitting in today. And we will be on for the next one next Thursday, same time. So hope to see all of you here. So thank you, Matt.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.